thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today we're pleased to have a guest who's no stranger to Liberty Talk Radio. Paul Jacob is president of Citizens in Charge, a non-partisan group working to protect and expand initiative rights. In addition to his many activities fostering individual liberty, Paul hosts Common Sense, an online and print opinion commentary which reaches tens of thousands of online readers and email subscribers, of which I am one. He covers a myriad of subjects, all of them pertinent, and give you a better understanding of the true meaning of liberty and how our legislators should be reacting to it. His writings have been featured in USA Today as well as most major news publications. During our broadcast, we want you to call in with your questions or comments, 646-652-4620. That's 646-652-4620. If you'd like to break in and ask a question or make a comment, just press the one button so you can alert us, all right? And please, before I get off the air, and I turn this over to Paul, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by going to YouTube and subscribing to Liberty Talk Radio. And you can subscribe to our reminder service by going to our website and clicking on the subscribe button. You will not get any emails, no advertisements, nothing other than you'll be contacted as to when our next show is and who our guest will be. Okay? Well, Paul, welcome to Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you very much, Joe.
It's great having you back.
It's great to be here. I had a few computer glitches on the way, but I think I'm okay now.
Well, that's the story of our lives. We always have a computer glitch here, so we are accustomed to it. Well, Paul, right now, there you go. We got double Pauls. Okay, here we go. Hold on a second. We're going to try to get me on there with you at the same time. Da-dun, da-dun. There we go. Okay, now, you know, I already told our booking agent never to book anyone who is younger than I am, better looking than I am, and has more hair on the head than I do. And they never listen to me, Paul. I just can't seem to train them properly.
I got 2 out of 3. I'm only beating on my head.
You're too kind. Well, Paul, today you want to talk about the ballot issues. They're all important. What I don't understand about the entire election, well, there's a lot of things I don't understand. I really wish that our libertarian counterpart would be in the debates. He would add something to it. Although I think he's kind of Millie Mouse on some of the issues, I really wish he would take a stronger stance. And it just bothers me that he doesn't. And of course, the running mate, well, he thinks, Hillary almost walks on water, which really bothers me. And so there seems to be a lot of confusion among the those people who are libertarian leaning when they listen to these guys speak. And I'm not sure if they're doing more harm than good. And I hate to say that on the air, but I'm very, very concerned about that. But because this was our big opportunity to really make a point. And it seems that we are, as the old term is, waffling on the issues too often and not being a little stronger in the way we project the true meaning of liberty within the scope of each resolution.
Well, I would agree with you, and in fact, I've done a couple of commentaries saying that they were kind of libertarian-ish, but also a little bit democratish. And they have been, Weld and even Johnson has said good things about Hillary Clinton, and not that they need to tear her down in any personal way. I'm sure she's a fine neighbor, and a great woman to talk to at the at the bus stop or wherever. But in terms of her political policies, they're horrible. And really, we have a choice this time. It's one reason that Gary Johnson and Bill Weld are getting so much attention is we have two candidates, the Republican and the Democrat, who are not just bad, they're terrible. They're terrible. I don't want my children to ever see or listen to anyone like Donald Trump, ever. Right. I don't think you even have to go to his policies. Just personally, he's unfit for the office, and his policies happen to be terrible to boot.
Right.
Not much of a Republican when it comes to free trade. Someone who has participated in political corruption is, if you read your newspapers, I won't go into all the details. You can read it there every day. They don't seem to publish as much about Hillary Clinton, but here's a woman who I think is thoroughly corrupt. And you don't have to reach any of the recent controversies, which people know about, but I think a lot of people have forgotten the two words that, to me, make Hillary Clinton unfit to be president. And those two words are cattle futures. Hillary Clinton, when Bill Clinton was Attorney General and Governor of Arkansas, parlayed her complete lack of any knowledge about cattle futures into $100,000. Her trades were handled by someone who was the attorney for Tyson's Foods, which next to Walmart, those are the two big companies in Arkansas, all kinds of business before her husband. And basically, to make a long story short, she took $100,000 bribe in this scam of cattle futures trading. And I haven't forgotten it. And of course, her work since then hasn't been very good either. We're finding out more and more about the FBI investigated her like they investigated no one else ever in history, giving everybody immunity and ridiculous, and not following a lot of different questions. But both of them have policies that are terrible, that aren't really supported. They're both establishment politicians. I mean, Trump has never held public office before, but he has been involved in buying politicians and funding people like Hillary Clinton. He repeatedly gave her contributions. On my Facebook, I posted a picture the other day of them, kind of gabbing and laughing it up at Trump's wedding. So basically, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are not far apart. They've been friends. They come from the same attitude and the same place, I think, in our society. One's been a politician for sale. One has been a businessman, a crony capitalist, not a real capitalist, who's bought politicians. And so they're corrupt, and I think personally unfit for the job. And yet their policies are also terrible. They're establishment policies. If you like what we have, which 2/3 to 3/4 of the country says they don't like it, you want somebody else. And then we're denied a chance to even hear from someone else. These debates, what is happening in our country is a private takeover. And folks on the left are usually pretty quick in the media to point out that private interests are gaining way too much power. Well, let me give you Exhibit A of that. When the Debate Commission, which is controlled, it's a private organization controlled by the Republicans and Democrats, pushed the League of Women Voters off the cliff and said, you don't get to control debates anymore because we want them to be for us, for the two major parties. And they blocked Gary Johnson, they blocked Jill Stein. Both of them are on enough ballots to win, Gary Johnson on all 50. And the truth is, Gary Johnson in some states is has polled ahead of one of the candidates, not third, but second place. And the truth is, to look at polls seems to me to be ridiculous. The whole reason we're having debates is for people to make up their mind. To have a quick poll, why don't we just have a poll? Whoever wins the poll, why spend all the money on the election? And so, because when you see it in the polls since the first debate, young people were supporting, and I'm talking about people 34 and under, were supporting Gary Johnson, number one, since the debate, and that was really hurting Hillary. That's one of the reasons why Trump was so close. Since the debate, you see, since he wasn't there, since a subtle but very powerful message was sent to people across the country that he's not a legitimate choice, he's lost support, and that support has gone to Hillary Clinton. And young people don't want to vote for Clinton, but they so despise Donald Trump that I'm afraid they're going to begrudgingly vote for Clinton because they feel like that's the only two choices they have. It is a crime against us to have an election process in which it's rigged like this. And Mr. Trump has talked about it being rigged, but it is rigged, and it's wrong, and we are going to suffer one of these two, you know, what I would call the crazy or the crook, and you can almost call either one of them both. We're going to suffer from that because people don't have a real choice. And, you know, as libertarians, we've lost a number of elections. We don't cry boo-hoo. We know we're big boys and girls. We understand we may not win. But here's an election in which 2/3 of the people want Stein and Johnson included, in which people are desperate to find an alternative to these two bozos, and we don't get any chance to actually hear that alternative. That's not freedom like we think we're supposed to have in the United States of America. That sounds like someplace like Russia. It's ridiculous. And of course, when we talk about Russia, it's been such a big part of this campaign. We've got Donald Trump, who thinks Putin's the best thing since sliced bread. And we have Hillary Clinton, who has presided over a just humiliating foreign policy, ridiculous, where they carry a stupid reset button over to Russia, but they weren't even sophisticated or competent enough to get the right Russian word for reset. Instead, the word they put on the reset button in Russian meant overcharged. So, you know, her foreign policy has been a complete disaster. It's the one thing she's been responsible for. I mean, we are in almost the worst of all possible worlds. And the only thing that makes me hesitate to say that is I always say it can always get worse. Right. But it's pretty darn bad.
Yeah. Well, you know, the world as a whole, in fact, just today on, I think it was Neil Cavuto, was mentioning that the entire world is awash in debt. Now, the mainstream media steers away from this because it's so negative. And I think they're forced to stay away from it because when you talk about the hellacious debt of the United States and the plight of the average working person, that doesn't bode very well. Advertisers don't want to spend their advertising dollars on a station that's saying the world is coming to an end. You know, save your money, don't spend money. You may need it in the case of an economic catastrophe. Well, you're not going to sell many cars or many dishwashers when you say that. So they avoid that like the plague. And today they mentioned that, and it really surprised me. I don't watch it very often, but I just happened to be channel surfing, and bingo, I noticed that, and I said, geez, they're actually talking about the world economy and how hellaciously it's $157 trillion, according to the International Monetary System, $157 trillion in current year's debt. I don't know about you, it's a lot of money to me, you know? And yeah. So we know we're in deep trouble, and all the candidates talk about is all the programs that they're going to initiate, which is going to cost billions and sometimes trillions of dollars, with no respect whatsoever to the fact that we not only are broke, we not only cannot pay our current debts, but we're going to add more debts, and then people applaud that.
Yes, it's. I don't know if you see these Pete Peterson Foundation commercials that run every once in a while about how big a problem debt is and how it will soon be the third largest budget item for the federal government, just paying the interest, not paying off any of the debt, just covering the interest. And of course, interest rates are incredibly low. And the Federal Reserve keeps talking about they're gonna kind of make money a little more expensive, but they haven't made it. And every time they've even hinted about it, the stock market has shot like a rocket into the toilet.
Right.
We are in a lot of trouble. The media is, I think, unlikely to cover much of it for one reason, just because it's difficult. It's easy to say, oh, here's the dumb thing that so-and-so said. Bill Clinton just said Obamacare was ridiculous. Trump insulted someone else. You don't have to do research. You don't have to get experts on. That's easy. And that's why I think that they cover that a lot more. But we have a really, really serious problem. And most people I know who I think, I respect their economic acumen, believe we could never pay off the $20 trillion that we owe. And if the world owes $157 trillion, how do we think some of these economies that are not quite as good as ours, there's a lot of trouble out there and a lot of hurt. We're headed in the wrong direction, and it doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum, people seem to realize that. And then we come to an election in which we basically have no choice for the highest office in the land.
Right.
And so it really is sickening, and I wish I could, I'm very glad that we have more initiatives on the ballot this year than we've had in the last 2 or 3 election cycles. I think that's great. Unfortunately, I think most of the initiatives that are on the ballot, I'd vote against. A lot of them being pushed by, special interests who want some special favor. And others, one of the things they're pushing that I'm fighting is Amendment 71 in Colorado, which would make it much, much tougher to do a initiative constitutional amendment in that state. You'd have to get, instead of just getting signatures statewide, you'd have to actually qualify in all 35 state Senate districts, which will probably double the cost, double the difficulty for grassroots groups trying to figure out how to do all this, and then would require a 55% majority to pass any initiative. So that if you're a big, powerful special interest, and the gas and oil lobbies up there have already spent several $1 million trying to pass Amendment 71, if you're a big special interest, sometimes it's very tough to defeat a reform idea by getting 50% plus one no.
Yeah, right.
But you can spend a ton of money in vicious, slanderous TV ads and hold that down to maybe 52 or 53 or 54%. Well, in Colorado, if Amendment 71 passes, you'll need 55% to pass any future initiative constitutional amendment. And it is designed to, people are sick and tired of special interest, so let's give special interests more power.
Yeah.
That's in a year in which everyone's mad at the establishment, the entire bipartisan Republican Democratic establishment of Colorado is pushing and spending money to try to gut the citizen initiative rights of the people of Colorado. They haven't gotten the message at all. And we've got to turn that around. I think one of the ways to do it is we're not going to be given the choices we want. We've got to do it ourselves. And I urge people, go to thisiscommonsense.com. You'll see some of the things that I'm talking about, some of the initiatives that we could do. You can go to libertyifund.org, and we work with people around the country trying to get things on the ballot that'll help reform things. And I'll give you a case in point of what we're up against. We helped the people in Ferguson, Missouri. Remember Ferguson?
Oh, yes.
It seems like it'd be kind of an important place to do some reform. Well, we worked with citizens there. They drafted what a number of people who've studied the issue say is an excellent initiative to require the police to use lapel cameras and create a system for which, we can judge whether the public has a right to know, who has a right to get the tapes, all those sorts of things. And I think it's something that people across the spectrum are going to like. We turned in the signatures, and all of a sudden the city didn't know where the signatures were. Finally, after it was clear we're gonna engage an attorney and we're gonna come after you, all of a sudden they mysteriously found the signatures, and finally sent them over to the county to be validated. We have enough signatures. It should go on the ballot. It should have gone on the ballot this November, but they've already delayed it now because of just either sheer incompetence or a malignant disrespect for the voter. Choose one or the other. They have delayed it to where it won't go on the ballot until April. But this is, friends out there listening, This is the only way we're going to take back this government. And I don't mean take it back to some far off, the past was not perfect. We're not looking to return to some wonderland in the past. We're looking to make modern, sensible reforms that are in keeping with the underlying idea of this country all along. This country has done things like slavery. We had Jim Crow for 100 years. We have police forces that are getting away with things that are outrageous. We now have almost a war where you've got people shooting policemen. None of that has to happen. The underlying idea of America has always been liberty. What's beautiful about this country was not a constitution that said blacks were 3/5 of a person. It was a revolution that led to all men are created equal, which finally we're getting a little closer to. But this criminal justice situation can be solved. It won't be solved by all the special interest in the different groups that are spending a lot of money to jawbone it. It'll be solved by citizens putting reforms on the ballot, educating their fellow citizens, and getting them passed. And one reason I say that is because there have been a few places where they've made reforms. We've talked before, Joe, about civil asset forfeiture, where basically the police are taking things from people without ever charging them with a crime.
Real problem.
This is a terrible, terrible thing to have going on. It basically corrupts the police force. It sends a message to people that they're basically dealing with highway robbery. And that could be solved tomorrow, but not by a bunch of talk. And even where legislatures like in New Mexico have taken some action, President Obama has spoken out against it. Others have said things, we need reform. And yet the federal government continues to encourage cities and states, even where they've outlawed the practice, to do it on the federal level. And the feds come in and the state or local police help them, and the feds give them 80% of the take so that they can continue this highway robbery that they know everybody's against. It's outrageous. And if we fix it without engaging the public, the most important thing about the initiative to me is the way it educates people and brings people into the solution, so that when we solve problems and our elected officials a few years later start to backslide, you've got the public there saying, hey, wait a second, we dealt with this issue, we understand this issue, and we're not going to let you backslide. Yeah. So I'm hoping to see criminal justice reform on the ballot all over the country, not this November for the most part, but in coming years, and there are a lot of other things we can do as well.
All right, Paul, we have someone on the line. I think they want to break in and ask a question. Area code 732, I believe it is, on line 1. Caller, you're on the air. Excuse me? Oh, did they press 1? Oh, you haven't pressed 1. It's okay. They can still talk, can't they? I think they can say. All right, caller, would you like to ask a question or make a comment? I guess not. Area code 732. There you go. Are they on? Caller, your first name and your question or comment, please. I hear an echo on me. I hear an echo. Okay, well, Paul, I guess we can't get that person on the line for some reason. They're on the line, but we can't hear them for some reason. You have any idea what's happening? Okay, well, Paul, if you had to draw a timeline or a historical line, it seems to me, but maybe I'm becoming a diehard pessimist, it seems that things aren't getting better. Some things get better, but overall, things are getting worse. People have lost the very, not lost, but don't seem to comprehend the concept of liberty. We always look to the government for everything, absolutely everything. And if the government doesn't give us something, that's almost perceived as a loss of liberty, like the government isn't working for us. When the government really doesn't have anything, they can only take from us to give to someone else. This concept just has not been taught in school. People don't comprehend it. They don't read it. If you watch television and mainstream media, you certainly are not getting it there. So it seems like we're going down this abyss, and it's very difficult to turn back. To me, it seems things are worse than they ever were before. Am I just getting so pessimistic that I can't see the forest because of the trees?
No, I think you're onto something, and I think things are getting better in the sense that I actually think the electorate, the public, is wiser and better and has more of a libertarian attitude. And I don't want to take that too far.
Right.
You know, they haven't read the platform and agreed with every plank or something, but I just think generally they realize that you know, government screws up a lot of things, and that freedom is a good thing, and that not allowing one segment of the population to dictate how the other segment lives is a positive. You know, you look at things like gay marriage, which has been very controversial, but if you look at the younger folks, millennial voters, overwhelmingly in favor of it. Overwhelmingly in favor of things like medical marijuana and legalizing marijuana. And if you look at ballot initiatives, I think the most interesting thing about this election is there are no gay marriage measures on the ballot because that issue has been decided. And even though it was decided in a way in which most of the votes were in favor of banning same-sex marriage, it forced the courts in to look at equal protection, and they ruled that you can't, under equal protection, deny those rights to gay couples. But it also did something else. It educated people. And I don't want to say it educated them in the sense that they went to some book and studied. It caused people to think about it and to deliberate and to talk to their friends and relatives and to just consider. And I think people really, if you look at the polls, a lot of minds were changed, not just young people, but across all the age brackets. The other issue on the ballot is medical marijuana and legalizing marijuana. And I think it's going to win almost everywhere it's on the ballot. And I think that is something that libertarians ought to take some pride in, both of those. Because libertarians were for equal rights for gay people, 3-4 decades ago, not just recently, not just when it looked like there were some big gay donors who might give to the Democratic Party, say, or when the polls started to change. Libertarians were on the right side of that issue long before the polls said that's the way to be. And the same's true with legalization of drugs and marijuana. We've been talking about this for decades and pushing. And I think we ought to take a little bit of credit for being way ahead of the game. And also, someone had to start the discussion. And in a society in which you've got two people running for office, both of which are trying to, shape shift and become chameleons to somehow get a majority of the vote, they're not likely to bring up any controversial issue.
Right.
They're not likely to take even the tiniest risk. And so we need those other voices. And I'll add to that, one of the other initiatives that I think is one of the 10 most important this year is an initiative in Maine about ranked choice voting. That's question 5. And the reason I think that's so important is because ranked choice voting would allow more voices to be heard. And at the same time, I think it's likely to really create a disincentive to being a slash and burn, attack the other side, insult people, be obnoxious. And I think both parties have practiced that. I think, when you say that, you think of Trump. But hey, he's not the only guy who's done that. That's been happening for a long time. And what ranked choice voting will do is allow you not just to vote for one person and hope they win. And what happens in this election, there are going to be a lot of people who don't want to vote for Hillary. They don't want to vote for Trump, and yet they're going to vote for him. So what message is sent to everybody else? It's that somehow, well, maybe these guys had more support. These folks had more support than we thought. With ranked choice voting, you could rank your first choice, and then your second, and your third. Depending on how many candidates there are, you can go all the way through the ballot. What would happen in this election is that you would see a tremendous vote total for Gary Johnson, a much, much larger vote total for Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. In fact, I think if you had this, you might see Gary Johnson beating Trump. You might see Gary Johnson coming in first place. But if people were able to do that, what would happen is, let's say that you really don't like Hillary, you think she's the worst of all possible worlds, then you vote for Johnson or Stein, and then your second choice might be the other one, and your third choice might be Trump. But in the end, that might allow you to say, hey, I'm not wasting my vote. I really want to stop Hillary. Or vice versa. You're going to have a lot of folks who say, I wouldn't vote for Trump. I want to stop him no matter what. And I know people in both of these camps, people who cannot stand Donald Trump who are going to vote for him, and people who cannot stand Hillary Clinton who are going to vote for her, because otherwise the person they can't stand even more is going to be the elected president.
Right.
And ranked choice voting would take that out of the mix. In Maine, where it's on the ballot as question 5, they have elected governor after governor with a plurality of the vote. And their current governor, you may have heard him because he was the guy who left that completely ridiculous, obnoxious rant screaming at someone, a state legislator, and threatening to punch him in the face. Just ridiculous stuff. He has won re-election with less than a majority. Most of the state doesn't want him. And if you had ranked choice voting, it would allow people to make better choices, to send better signals to the political marketplace about what they really want, not just who they most don't want. And I think that's critical.
That's right, because if you took like a small university of, let's say, 3 people, the first voter goes in and says, well, I'm never going to vote for a Republican, but I will vote for, I'll vote for the Democrat, but second place, I'll vote for the Libertarian. Third, I'll vote for the Republican. And then you had the reverse. You had 3 people who voted that way. You'd have the person, the Libertarian in that scenario, if you just change them around again, you would have the Libertarian winning the ballot. But the problem is we don't have ballot access as we should. What I enjoy watching is the House of, I enjoy watching the House of Commons on television, but I also enjoyed watching the debate for the prime ministership in England. And I thought it was fascinating. Oh, we just lost him. We just lost, what happened? Okay, we didn't lose him, did we? Okay. What was interesting is that they had, during the debate, they had something like 8 people on stage, parties that you never heard of. They had the Labor Party, the Conservative Party, and all this other stuff. But they had even parties that you never heard of, these obscure parties, parties that had a very, very small majority of the population. And what was nice is that the candidates asked questions among themselves. They weren't canned questions predetermined by some other organization. So you may have somebody in the Conservative Party asking someone else who's a liberal in the Liberal Party or the Labor Party a question, and vice versa. And what was really particularly interesting is that Cameron, who was the reigning prime minister, his position on the stage was all the way to one side. He had the Ron Paul slot, as I call it, and you hardly saw him, but you did have center stage those parties. In fact, I think the way it worked out is that the parties of least popularity had center stage, the exact opposite of what we do here, and we consider ourselves a free country. Remember, we broke away from England. We should beg England to take us back.
Well, it's not that, I don't think that if we had ranked choice voting, the next president's gonna be a libertarian. Now, of course, in this present scenario, that's not far-fetched at all.
It's not far-fetched, not right.
But what we would have is those ideas being expressed, and we would have people involved in the debates who were not just angling to somehow take power.
Right.
I think what we're all sick about is these folks giving us a song and dance so they can wield power. That's all they want. They don't care. To us, politics is about issues. To the politicians, issues are simply something to check to try to get votes so they can wield power.
Yeah.
And we need some other voices involved in this debate. And we also need, in a lot of the states, half the states have initiative and referendum. We need it in the other states. Most people have it at the local level. About 60%, according to the Association of Cities, say that about 60% of the cities around the country have it. We need it everywhere. And people need to realize sometimes when you're mad at City Hall and you think, what can I do? And then you realize, well, geez, even if I change my council person, there's another 10 council people I'd have to deal with. Don't throw up your hands and give up. Look and see if there's an initiative process in your city, because the other thing about that is it gets us away from this blue team, red team garbage.
Yeah, I'm really sick of that.
And it allows people to connect with one another about real issues. I can't tell you how many times, when I was working term limits, oftentimes, we're doing something, and after some event, 4 or 5 of us go sit down and have lunch. And of course, the one guy says, well, you must be a Republican. And I say, oh, no, I'm a libertarian. And someone else says, well, hey, I'm a Democrat. And then someone else says, well, I've always been an independent. And you realize there are people all across the spectrum who agree with you on issues that are important to them, just like they're important to you. It creates, I think, a community around politics that's much, much better. And frankly, I spend a decent amount of time debating people who disagree with me.
Yeah.
Fundamentally
Paul, may I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, please.
We do have that caller back on the air again. Caller, you're on the air. Line 1. Your question or comment, please.
Hi, this is Joe from Toms River, New Jersey.
All right, Toms River, New Jersey. Good, my Jersey boy. What's on your mind, Joe?
Hey, Joe, how are you? You remember me?
No.
You had given me some advice. On a talk show a while back.
Okay, very good. How did it work out?
Pretty good. But anyway, my question is, what was Paul's thoughts on? A lot of people are talking about the establishment really rigging this election in light of what they did during the Democratic primaries with all the shenanigans they had with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. What are his thoughts on the general election as far as that being rigged, with the establishment and whatnot? And I'll hang up and listen for your answer.
Well, Joe, are you also referring to maybe some of the problems that they had with the voting machines and them being rigged as well? Is that part of your question? Oh, I think he hung up already. Okay. Paul?
Well, let me first say that between the age of 2 and 8, which wasn't really that long ago, I lived in Old Bridge, New Jersey. So a shout out to a fellow Jersey boy.
That's great.
Last week, I kind of took a day off for my own enjoyment, and my enjoyment was to go to the San Francisco Freedom Forum, which had a defector from North Korea tell her story, had folks from Syria, a woman from Cuba whose father had been killed by the Castro regime, a number of different people, and it was very emotional. It really touched me, and not that would be surprising, but to the point of kind of thinking, geez, I'm starting to tear up. And I at lunch, as there's a break, several of us were talking, and one of the things that came up is, it's not only important for you to fight to defend your rights, it is important, it is critical that all of us have the attitude of, I'm going to defend my opponent's rights every bit as much.
Right.
Voltaire, who said, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Right.
And the reason that comes to mind is because when we see what happened in the Democratic Party with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and basically them trying to rig that in Hillary's favor, to me that means more than any position. I have people who I love and respect who disagree with very fundamental things, and we might argue about them. But I have a ton of respect for these people, even though we disagree, because they're honest and because they believe in a democratic process and in a process where rights are respected. And I think what we see when we see that the country is dying for an alternative other than Trump and Clinton, and they are denied a chance to hear from those alternatives, that is destructive to the underlying foundation of our society. And so, yes, the election is rigged. It has been rigged. The fact that Gary Johnson, who's polling in double digits, and even Jill Stein, who's polling more at 3 and 4%, but who's on enough ballots to win, the fact that we as voters on the all-important debates, that they are pushed off the stage, that is rigging the election. We live in a country in which elections are rigged. And if you go to thisiscommonsense.com, you'll see the last 3 days was a 3-part commentary about a case that, thank goodness, the Supreme Court finally put the nail in the coffin of this case. But it's a case where Democratic prosecutors in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, used dawn SWAT-like police raids to go into people's homes who were suspected of campaign finance violations. And at dawn, banging on their doors, they had battering rams. They were afraid their dogs were going to be shot. One person, they came and he was out of town. His 16-year-old son was the only person there. And so at dawn, people are smashing against the door, police with guns. They take all this material, and then it turns out every single court that looked at it, both the lower level state court, the state Supreme Court, a federal judge, the U.S. Supreme Court, everybody who looked at it said there are no crimes that have been committed here except violations of people's civil rights by the prosecutors. And yet, as the case now ends, what have the prosecutors done? They took the information that they stole and that the courts ordered them to keep secret pending them returning it or destroying it, and they leaked it to the Guardian newspaper. Now, we hear all kinds of hand-wringing because Snowden leaked stuff to the Guardian newspaper. He leaked what was an unconstitutional program taking place that nobody knew about. And yet now we have prosecutors slapped down by the courts as being abusive and destructive to the basic fundamental political rights people have. And they leak all this information, basically giving, in this case, Democratic Party operatives, all this information on their Republican opponents. And it doesn't matter who's the Republican or who's the Democrat unless you believe in this partisan nightmare that we find ourselves living in. What does matter is that we have government officials who will literally break down your door and take stuff from you so that they can give it to your political opponent. And we've had the same thing. It doesn't get much press because I guess the media is either partisan or asleep or something. But years ago, and as you know, Joe, I've always been on the side that gay marriage should be allowed. And it should be, frankly, the government ought to be out of it. It ought to be a legal contract and have nothing to do with getting some license from the government. But if they're going to grant licenses to some, they should grant licenses to all without a whole lot of moralizing. Right. and that. Years ago, the IRS sent to the Human Rights Campaign that's pushing for same-sex marriage a list of the donors on the tax return filed by the Organization for Marriage. I'm messing up their name, but it's something like that. The National Organization for Marriage. That is a felony. That is a serious crime. But the IRS's response to people wanting to look into it, that's a private personnel matter. They basically circled the wagons, wouldn't give any information on who committed that crime. Nobody has paid a price, just like with Miss Lerner. and the harassment and denial of legal status to Tea Party and conservative groups that the IRS has done, no penalty. Now, in Wisconsin, because a friend of mine, Eric O'Keefe, fought back and organized an effort to fight back in court and elsewhere, they've changed some of the laws. The Government Accountability Board that had been so partisan and had, I think, broken the law in numerous cases, has been shut down and replaced with a new organization. So they've made some change, and I think that they're sending a message that maybe somebody will hear about not taking away people's rights. But throughout the country, they're getting away with it. The IRS for years has gotten away with it. You know, we think about Nixon and what he did, and I don't think Obama was somehow picking up the phone and pulling strings, but I think the IRS works in a partisan way, and their first partisanship is to themselves. They don't want people out there who are saying we ought to get rid of the IRS. And so they ought not to be in a position to be granting nonprofit or tax-exempt status when they're the taxing authority. That ought to be done separately. There's all kinds of reforms. But to make a long story short, yes, the election has been rigged already. There are other ways they rig it. And our government is the #1 special interest in the country.
Paul,
there are all kinds of special interests. They're the worst.
Do you think that all of the problems that the average citizen perceives and has experienced is morphing into a feeling that people want more states' rights and less federal rights? And can you project down the road maybe certain states actually attempting to or threaten, let's say even threaten to secede from the Union if Washington doesn't square things away constitutionally?
Well, I think secession is probably not the place to go. You know, they talk about it all the time in Texas. There are people talking about it in New Hampshire now. And I happen to believe that I believe in self-determination down to the state level, down to the county and city level, down to the block level, down to the home. If people want something else, they ought to have a chance to get that something else politically. And so it should be done peacefully, but I do believe people have a right to leave, just like the Brexit, England leaving the EU, and everyone gets up in arms. That's a decision to be made by the people of Britain.
Right.
And so, you know, I support those sorts of things, but I do think that you're going to see more and more states looking for ways to get out from under the federal government, whether it's state compacts that try to do things and so that they can say, look, we don't need your help, federal government. I think wise people in Congress hopefully will more and more start to just block grant stuff back to the states. And of course, what they ought to do is find out how much we're block granting and just stop taxing. Let the states do that. Decentralization of political power is a very important thing. We've gotten all screwed up in this country because of slavery, which is, you know, Jefferson was right. He was wrong to have slaves, but he was right that it was going to rip this country apart.
Right.
It's a horrible thing. And the aftermath of it has also been horrible. For a century, you had Jim Crow laws and other things to keep blacks down. And all of that has been associated with states' rights. I sometimes go to international conferences where they talk about direct democracy and governance. And almost everyone is in favor of decentralizing power and moving it back to the state or the canton or the, you know, what have you. In the U.S., that has had this tint of being racist, which nobody in their right mind wants that tint. And so I think we've been less likely to argue for that. We need more of that. We need more power close to home, less power in the hands of the federal government. But I'll say this. I think we can do it in a way that is not dangerous to, you know, this isn't about letting states go crazy and do things like the government of Mississippi did back in the 60s and 50s, because we do have the 14th Amendment. And I think what I would like is a federal government that does almost nothing except defend the country from invasion and use the 14th Amendment to make sure the states do not deny the rights of their citizens. Because frankly, working initiative and referendum, legislatures are constantly trying to destroy the process. They're not gutsy enough to come out and do that by just repealing it, because they know the people would say, what are you talking about? We're not going to let you repeal that, and they'd vote against it. But they pass law after law after law designed to weaken it, to make it unusable by anyone but their special interest cronies who have loads of money. And if it weren't for the federal courts stopping them when we take them to court, we win almost every time we go to court, because they're constantly passing unconstitutional laws. So I do want a federal government that defends our rights from the states. But I want them to stop trying to be the education people, because they don't educate anyone and they make it harder for states and local governments to educate. I want them to get out of the energy business. I want them to get out of almost everything they're doing, because they're standing in the way. We need fewer regulations. Pass a law. Make Congress pass laws that are across the board. What happens so often is that we have these regulatory agencies who are in bed with certain companies, and usually in bed with the big companies in the very area they're supposed to be regulating them. So that's not helping us. That's not stopping crony capitalism. To me, there are three areas that we have to deal with. And when I say we, I mean you and me and the people listening. I don't mean some politician somewhere, because they're not going to do it. Those three areas are holding government accountable. We need things like term limits. We need ethics reform. There was just a study that showed when you pay politicians more, they do less legislating and more fundraising to stay in office. We need less pay and less benefits for politicians, and I think they do a better job. We need initiative and referendum. That's holding government accountable. We need an end to crony capitalism. We need to start letting people, just some decision the other day where they're going to continue to regulate these women doing hair braids and forcing them to go to a barber school where they don't even know how to do hair braids. They can't teach them anything. But it will mean that the poor person can't get out of the ghetto because they can't use the trade that they have. It's sick. Right. And we need to protect our liberties. We need a real change when it comes to criminal justice issues, and civil asset forfeiture is first to be done away with, but we also need other reforms look, police have a tough job. I'm not anti-police. I think some of these cases, like Ferguson, for instance, the policeman, I think, was in the right, not in the wrong. But we need reforms, and we need to get to a point where just because, the person who was shot did something wrong or this or that, why are they always shot dead? Just this morning, I read in the paper about someone who was wielding a machete who was shot and killed. Why wouldn't they shoot him in the leg? Why wouldn't they shoot him somewhere where they, in other words, we need to get a handle on this. Yeah. It's our stuff to deal with. These are basic fundamental issues. It doesn't require some expert somewhere from some university. Every citizen has to start taking it upon themselves. And I know they're not all going to do it, but I think the question to your listeners is, are you one of the people in America who's going to take citizenship and being a real person who contributes seriously and start contributing? Our politics is sick. And as I point out to people, if you think you can just ignore it, you may not be interested in politics, but unfortunately, politics is interested in you.
All right. Paul, let me ask you the $64,000 question. During the 1930s, we went through a severe depression, but the financial makeup of the United States was so different. We were under a gold standard. We were the world's manufacturing powerhouse. We had a balance of payments surplus. You name it. Actually, if you look at all the indicators, it was phenomenally good. Right? The Roaring '20s was a great time. What caused the depression, according to many economists, is the government reaction to the downturn, which then, with the tariffs and whatever, and caused a slowdown in the economy. But we were in infinitely better shape than we are today. Many economists, noted economists, are saying we are on the brink of another depression, but this time it's going to be exponentially worse. Our currency may die an unnatural death, and et cetera, et cetera. In that case, we're going to have all these people, 95 million people, who are relying on the government in one way, shape, or form. If there is a real severe depression where our currency collapses, do you see the states taking over and maybe considering a federation of states like the anti-federalists did, or do you see us continuing as a nation as we are today? I know it's an unfair question, but I was just throwing it out. I'm curious.
It's a very, very hypothetical question,
Right.
but it's not far-fetched, and that's the scary part. I've been very, very concerned. The stock market roars ahead, and yet I think the people I know who know the stock market best I think all those are here today, gone tomorrow profits.
Right.
And it's been very volatile. The underlying indicators are not good. They're bad. I think there's a lot of trouble. And the scary thing about predicting what would happen after a collapse like that is that you don't know. The states might want to do something like that, but the federal government may march in troops to say, we have to, we're going to take power. Bad things can happen out of crises just as well as good things. I will tell folks, I don't necessarily, if you saw my bank account and my savings, I'm not sure that you would want to emulate my decisions. But years ago, I got a little extra money. Someone had left me some money, and I asked someone who I thought was pretty smart on investing, what would you do? How would you invest that money? And they said, buy gold. And I said, geez, that, buy gold, that seems like such a depressing, that's basically saying that things are just horrible. And he said, buy gold. Meaning, yes, they are horrible. And when they're horrible, you have to recognize it. And so it's, and I don't know that that's worked out so well. Gold is down over the last few years. It's significantly down, although it might go up at any time. And the advice of having a variety of investments, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, is very, very good advice. But I do think, I look at the world and I'm very frightened economically and otherwise. And yet I think the people of the world are more ready for freedom and democratic processes and rights than ever before. All over the globe, we want the same things. And damn it, our governments are standing in the way.
Right.
And we've got to find a way to stop that. I think we also, when I think of how we solve some of the world's problems, we have to start talking to each other and recognizing our own individual power and stop letting our politicians talk to each other all the time.
Yeah,
we need to unite in that way.
I'm more concerned about government's reaction to depression than the depression itself. Be honest with you.
Well, you probably are well aware that a few years ago, Cyprus had a bank collapse and so on, and reached into people's accounts and took money out.
Oh, and that'll be generous compared to what will happen here. Hold on.
Yes.
Paul, we're just about out of time. I'd like to give you the last 20 seconds, okay?
I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen unless you're part of the solution. Everybody out there listening, if you've enjoyed the conversation but you're not going to take action, it's not going to work.
Right.
We need your help. Go to thisiscommonsense.com, citizensincharge.org, libertyifund.org. There's a lot of other places to go. Get involved. Let's do some smart reform and don't let the politicians screw up our country.
Okay, Paul, thank you so much for being our guest. Once again, you've been a fantastic guest. We hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date and not too far away from now. And we'd love to have you back.
Sounds great. Love to do it, Joe.
Thank you so much, Paul, for everything that you do for all of us. All right. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.
Thank you for using Blog